My guest is Ibrahim Megari. He's the founder and chief executive of Rice Africa. Welcome to the program.
It's a
Welcome
pleasure.
to the studio.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Nice to have
I
you.
saw that you put on Twitter. Finally, we're having a live in.
Yeah, we've been on this for a while, right?
We've been on it for a while.
Yeah.
We've been talking virtually.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so good to have you on the program.
It's a pleasure.
Now let's get started. Why are we seeing the prices of food increase astronomically? I understand, of course, I do this every day, so I understand food inflation. I also understand some structural bottlenecks. But what many people cannot understand is the astronomical increase in food.
Yeah.
And we're approaching the festive season now.
Yeah.
So should Nigerians also expect that food prices will go higher?
Well, thank you for this interesting question. And I think to answer such a very interesting question, we need to reflect. It's not in isolation with the situations that we've been through. Let's start from the COVID lockdown of 2020. Remember, we had a lockdown in the middle of the year, almost at the peak of the cultivation season, that took us down to the harvesting season. So it disrupted the entire production chain of food in 2020. And it spilled over to 2021, right? When we were about to recover from the heat of COVID, then the Russian-Ukraine crisis came into place. And at the same time, 2020, 2021, the country was going through a lot of insecurity issues around farming areas. So I personally think what we're witnessing today, it's like a culmination of all these events that we went through, and it's just manifesting. And there's a ray of hope if you take into consideration the production cycle of this current season. I truly believe in the next 1 year or so, even though a lot of experts are predicting an increase by next year. But I don't think so, because insecurity, for instance, this year, the index, as reported by AFEX in their report, it's about 9%, 9 point something percent of areas surveyed complained of insecurity. So we're seeing a peak in production, which I believe will definitely bring the prices of food down. But as I know, the program will deep dive into that. I think we should also explore more into why, not only Nigeria, why is Africa facing a food crisis? Because the UNFAO has established that almost 350 million people are going through severe food crisis in the continent. And if you do a simple Google search, Nancy, why is Africa facing a severe food crisis? You see a lot of issues: COVID, Ukraine, insecurity, environmental issues, and stuff like that. As experts, we believe these are genuine reasons, but they're externalities. Externalities in the sense that if you, assuming Nigeria is as peaceful as Switzerland, right? Would the typical maize farmer in Nasarawa State be producing at par with his counterpart in Belgium or in Switzerland? No. Smallholder farmers in Africa produce 80% of the food that we eat. So if smallholder farmers are this influential in the production cycle, why are we having a food crisis?
So the question now will be, how do we permanently solve the issue of food crisis?
Excellent.
Because I also know that the FAO always warn almost every year that so millions of people will face hunger, so million of people, on the malnutrition, everything related to food. Then how do we solve food crisis in Africa? Or perhaps we should even domesticate it to Nigeria. How do we solve a food crisis in Nigeria? We know all the issues: insecurity, climate change, a lot of issues. But how do we solve it? Then secondly, I also want to ask you, of course, as the founder of Rice Africa, what do you foresee foresee for the price of rice, especially as we are coming to someone was asking me, a colleague, just a few weeks ago, like, Nancy, we need to talk about perhaps buying rice and keeping and all of that. So tell me about the price of rice. Where it is right now, a 50 kg bag of rice is over 45,000. So what do you foresee for the price of rice?
So let me start.
Should I come buy from you and store?
Let me start from the second question, which is much more important, because like you said, we're approaching the festive season. This is when, and rice is by far the #1 staple right now. because it's the most convertible. You eat rice with virtually everything. You can eat rice with barb, with salt, with oil, whatever. So when you look at the most consumed staple, people say it's maize. But in terms of human consumption, rice is number one because virtually everybody eats rice. And you can. So my prediction is, I said this almost 2 years ago. If you remember, we had a chat about 2 years ago. And I said the price of rice will keep on rising. And people keep on wondering, Nigeria is producing, we're the number one producer of rice in Africa with the local rice production. Why is local rice going up? And then foreign rice is a little bit affordable. It's very simple, Nancy. The entire rice production value chain is also part of, it's suffering from the inflation in other indices. For instance, when you are moving food, let's say from Maiduguri to Onitsha now, currently, you spend about 2 million on a truck. The cost of haulage itself is about 1.4, 1.5 million. And then what you pay, what they spend between Maiduguri on those tips on the way to Onitsha is about 400 and something thousand. So you are spending about 2 million.
As in tips?
Yes.
To who? To customs and co?
I don't know. So when you spend about 2 million to transport,
or money less.
to transport from Maiduguri to Onitsha, so it's going to be pushed down to the consumer. When we were processing, we stopped processing for this simple reason. We started processing when we were transporting from, let's say, from Taraba to Kano at less than 500,000. To Lagos, it was around 900,000. Now, currently, before you move a truck of rice to Lagos, it's almost about 6 million because of the cost of diesel. Let's move away from haulage. So everything that the rice farmer does has influence from external forces like diesel. We do mechanization. We harvest rice farms. Last year, around this time, we were harvesting around 80,000, 85,000 when the price of diesel was around 600, 700. Now we're buying diesel at 140, 1,400 naira per liter. And we're harvesting a hectare at around almost 130, 140,000. So all these things, the cost of processing, the cost of the bag, the people that are producing the bags, the transportation costs, and all these attendant issues will be passed down to the consumer. So to be very frank, I think we're just going through a phase. And now back to the question of having a permanent solution. For us to have a permanent solution is to fix those fundamentals that we've been talking about. I mentioned to you the externalities, environmental issues, insecurity. All these are externalities because if you peel them away, if there was no COVID, would there be production?
So to fix this, do you think that President Tinubu is on track? Because he came up with a food security plan.
I truly do so. But before I get into that, let's talk about the fundamentals. We discovered that through system thinking, because all the interventions that we've been having are in bits and pieces. You can't solve a problem of this magnitude if you are just reacting and you're solving one bit and giving farmers inputs is good, or giving farmers mechanization is good. But before you solve it on a holistic level, we discovered that the typical smallholder farmer goes through 7 fundamental touch points. If you really want to ramp up the productivity of the smallholder farmer in Africa, you have to fix these 7. And we've done that as a private business, and we've seen the result. Number 1, over 80% of our farmers prepare their land manually. Nancy, when you prepare your land mechanically, the difference is that you produce 50% more than the person that...
And efficiency is better.
You save water, you use less seeds, less chemicals.
Even less energy as a human being.
Thank you. That's number 1.
You live longer.
Thank you. Number 2, seeds. Almost 90% of our smallholder farmers plant grains, not seed. I don't know if you're aware of the difference between planting grains and planting seed. When you plant grains, it's like you are planting a 10th generation grain, while farmers in developed countries like in Europe and America, foundational seeds, first generation seeds.
Okay, so that brings me to the question. Sorry, I have to interrupt, but because of what you're saying now, what we need to fix, institutions like IITA, this where these kind of institutions, and I had a conversation with them some time ago, was it in September or so. I happened to be in Cross River State. I had a panel which I moderated, and I had IITA, and they were telling me, you know, fantastic things that they're doing. They have improved seeds, they're helping. So institutions like that.
They are doing their work. They are doing an excellent job. Recently, the Lake Chad Institute launched a wheat seed variety that is resistant to rain, meaning it could be rain-fed season now for the first time in the country. So they are doing that. But what I'm saying is the commercialization of those interventions. I've mentioned 2.
Yes.
Number 3 is access to chemicals. high-quality chemicals. 72% of the chemicals in the market that smallholder farmers are using are low quality, are disastrous to their health, defective to the environment, and they don't kill. And if you don't understand the relationship between weeds and crops, you'll not get it right. It's like a woman giving birth to a malnourished child. A woman, when she's hungry, she's pregnant and she doesn't take the necessary nutrients. When smallholder farmers plant, the crops do compete with weeds, and they don't have the qualitative chemicals to kill those weeds. And mind you, there are also weeds that are complementary, like rice. When you see azolla or seaweeds, they are complementary to the rice farm. But these farmers do not know the difference between a complementary weed and a destructive weed. Number 4, affordable, on-time delivery of non-contaminated fertilizer. Most of our farmers do not get most of the intervention. Even when they get fertilizer, they get it out of season. When you give a farmer fertilizer around June, what do you expect him to do with it? He's going to, so they don't even use fertilizers on time. When you give them fertilizer through whatever intervention program, and you are not giving them on time, and even if they give them on time, sometimes this fertilizer, the composition, instead of giving a farmer, like a maize farmer, if you're giving him, let's say, the NPK variety of fertilizer, you give him 20-10-10. Most of these farmers, they are shortchanged. They will get fertilizer as 10-10-10. Because the blenders, there are some really bad things going on, and when it gets to the farmer, he doesn't get it on time, and he gets it less quality, and it's virtually useless to him. And you are expecting him to produce at a yield that you are expecting to be putting as records. Number 5, best agronomic practices.
Because I have one more question to ask you before we go.
Yeah, nobody tells them what to do. No agronomic practices. And number 6 is mechanized harvesting. 1 hectare of a rice farm, mechanized manually, Nancy, they lose 2.8 tons of grains. In the last 3 years, through our organization in 2 countries, we've harvested about 5,600 hectares. Just 5,600 hectares. Nancy, we've saved over 15.2 million kilograms of grains. So if you translate that into the big picture, and lastly, most of these smallholder farmers do not have access to a structured market. So when you bring all these 7 things together, we believe this is what we call the operating system that can boost the productivity of the smallholder farmer in Africa and solve this insecurity problem that we've been currently having.
Okay, let's talk about the
You talked about Tinubu's...
Yeah, Tinubu's plan, food plan.
Yeah.
I would like you to look at that and this other question around the African Development Bank Special Processing Zones.
Yeah.
Yes, that is one concept now that they are really, integrating, especially even in Nigeria, because I know some of the initiatives here. So I would like you to speak about that quickly. We have about 2 minutes or so to go.
So for Tinubu's, I'm very, very confident. I'm very, very hopeful because of the body language of the president. First of all, he declared an emergency. He moved the food security issues to a national emergency. Secondly, I've been following the pronouncement of the Federal Minister of Agric, Senator Abubakar Kyari, and his counterpart Abdullahi Sabi. And thirdly, I don't know if you're aware, there's what we call now a National Agricultural Development Fund, which is going to be like a TED fund for the agri sector doing intervention. And the president recently appointed a gentleman that I believe is going to walk the talk, not just he's from the private sector, he's an expert in this particular field. So I think these are the things that are giving me confidence. And what the Honorable Minister has been doing so far in terms of the subsidy now declared on wheat farmers, and they are launching, in the next 2 days, they are launching the dry season farm. They've imported some variety of seeds. They are thinking about really producing wheat that we've never done in the country before. So these are things that I believe are giving me confidence to say that the president is on the right direction in terms of addressing this food security issue. Now back to the issue of SAPS. Special Agro Processing Zone. This is a wonderful initiative from the African Development Zone. The SAPS program is supposed to create clusters of activities around rural areas, close to the source of raw material, whereby you have, it's like shared facility, whereby you have processors, marketing, technology, everything together so that it will bring down the cost of food and importantly, protect us from this export of unprocessed raw materials so that we'll be able now to process within Africa and take advantage of the African free trade continental areas and then distribute around Africa and even export. Because we truly believe with the SAPS program, Africa can truly feed itself and it can truly feed the world.
You just talked as, I don't know, my previous guest before you came in, Professor David Luke, we were talking about Africa trade and all of that. So let's hope we'll see better things. But I don't know if you gave me a price of rice. You didn't give me specifically.
A
bag of rice, 50
You want me to
kg.
predict?
Yes, now that's what I asked earlier, and you want to smartly dodge it.
No. It's, experts have predicted the production has ramped up. It's very interesting. Production has gone up.
So how much do we expect for 50 kg of rice? Give me a range.
To be very frank, local bag of rice, I'm looking at it to be around 50K range.
50,000 naira.
Yes, wow. But okay. It will come down when we ramp up production, because the basic law of economics, when you have
demand and supply.
Thank you.
But anyway, you know, the history in this country, anything that goes up never comes down. It's very hard.
Hopefully with what we're seeing in terms of if the government go ahead and they implement all the plans that they have, definitely when you have excess production, you have surplus, price of food will definitely come down. We're hopeful of that.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, let's leave it at that. Thank you very much for coming on today's
Thank you,
edition of the program.